I finally got around to watching Invincible Season 3, and I can officially say that I understand what the hype was about. After Season 3, after really loving Season 1 and loving Season 2 as much as I did, I can confidently say, and I was thinking about soon making a video on like my favorite shows of all time. I have two shows that I know would be in like the SS tier, that being like the perfect shows for me personally. Attack on Titan, Better Call Saul, and I can confidently say that Invincible has found its way into like the top like level of peak fiction for what I personally enjoy. So we're going to be breaking down Invincible. We're going to be talking about the 8 episodes, what's been going on, where if there's anything that I didn't like, which I don't know if there was anything that I didn't like, but we're going to be talking about every single plot point. Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I am your guy with too many YouTube channels. So it's also important, one more thing. Sorry, I know this intro is a little bit long right now. I haven't read the comics. I have no intention on reading the comics. I would appreciate it if any comments that you leave didn't have any spoilers. Better yet, I'm probably not going to check because I am so into this show right now. So the show kicks off, and right with the first episode, there's not really a ton to talk about. We're introduced to Multi-Paul, who wants to get revenge for Duplicate, but we figure out Duplicate's alive, or, well, we didn't know that, but like her and the Immortal end up coming out of retirement. They just, reveal it to everybody. Other than that, Cecil is training Mark to become the greatest superhero of all time, and it really, really shows his power level is like getting up there with a Viltrumite. But after we get all the introduction out of the way, we kind of dive into the story with Mark and Eve right away, and I feel like I forgot, man, like this just goes on and on, point to point to point. They covered so much in this season, and there was not really any downtime this season. So Mark obviously doesn't know what to say to Eve because with the last season, the way that it ended with the multiverse and everything, we had that other version, or that older version of Adam Eve saying, hey, you need to confess your feelings. I was hung up on this for so many years. I just need to know whether you love me or not. So Mark was talking to his friends on whether or not he should do it, and his friends were obviously right. Like, the right thing to do would be obviously to talk to Eve, and I don't know if anybody else felt the same way, but I was like, no way, because I know, okay, the problem is Mark's a great guy, and I get it, okay? I get why he wanted to be truthful about seeing an alternate version of Eve and how broken she was, what she turned out to be, and said, hey, you need to tell me that you love me because I spent my whole life, like, hung over it. There is no chance in hell the right thing to do was to tell Eve the actual accurate story, and it ended up backfiring it as well. Did it backfire because they ended up together, but, she got all pissed off about it, and then it was difficult to, like, rekindle that relationship from it. So his friends were like, no, you can be truthful, but like don't talk about the other version of Adam Eve that you met. Yeah, that one should have been an absolutely not even a second thought. Keep that to yourself and die with it. So as we just talked about though, Mark ends up bringing up this conversation to Eve. They're kind of meant to be together. They're both superheroes. They both had like this love on and off thing going on where it seems like they were going to get together and they didn't. And then Mark decides to tell her about how he met this broken down alternate version reality of her who's been hung up on love for all these years. Idiot. So it caused them to it caused Eve to end up rejecting him because she thought like, oh, are you only saying that you love me or you want to be with me because I was broken in this other reality, whatever it was. And to be honest with you, it makes sense why she rejected him. I totally get that. Like, he just should have kept that to himself. But in the meantime, we had, the name's escaping me, whatever supervillain there was, he escaped custody and he was going on a rampage. But this is where the conflict between Mark and Cecil ended up coming on, and I thought this was very interesting the entire time. Spoiler alert, I'm on Cecil. I don't know. I'm on both sides, but I'm a little bit leaning more towards Cecil, especially as things continued on, right? So we have the supervillain on the loose. Mark and Eve have to go catch him. But what we didn't know is that Cecil kept some people alive. One of them was Darkwing. And after all of these horrible things, murdering people that they did, why did they get to work for the Guardians of the Globe? How could you possibly trust them? I get that. I get that completely. And I'm on Mark's side about that. But he just immediately turned around and was absolutely furious with Cecil about it. Cecil didn't really get a chance to explain himself though, and because Mark was just, kind of getting into a fit of rage, and I don't know if he was like really attacking Cecil, but he was really making his presence known enough to the point where Cecil actually had to trap him in that white room, bring those robots in, and then he had that, and I don't know what they ended up calling it, but that like sound ringing, like he surgically implanted something into Mark's brain in case he ever went rogue, where it just kind of like made him feel powerless. So Mark doesn't like that that's happening. He doesn't trust Cecil anymore. He doesn't know why Cecil is working with these morally compromised people, which is understandable, but he's going about it the wrong way. He just ended up, yapping at Cecil, getting angry, destroying things. It's understandable why Cecil had to trap him. What was he supposed to do? He's just a guy. So I don't know how Mark couldn't really, I couldn't really know how Mark, figured that out. But Mark ended up like really cutting things off with Cecil immediately, and it didn't get any better as the show went on. So other than that, Omni-Man and Alan bond a little bit, and they start figuring out exactly how powerful Alan actually is, because they keep trying to execute him, but it's not working. And that was actually really funny. But as the next episode continues on, we are brought into a younger Cecil, and I'm not going to break down the entire thing for you, but we get a little bit more in detail of Cecil, who he is, and kind of like really showing us that Cecil is a good character, because there's been things here and there that like made you doubt Cecil a little bit. Ultimately, I did like Cecil. I've always felt bad for him a little bit, but the point of that story was that Cecil is one of those guys that will do anything necessary to protect planet Earth. That's where Mark kind of has an issue. And I think I jumped the gun a little because I remember after that is when Mark actually ended up having that device activated for Cecil. He starts freaking out. He's kind of overpowering it, kind of not. He's not really able to fly, but he actually goes into the Guardians of the Globe like, hey, Cecil's attacking me. This is where the Guardians end up splitting up, and Cecil actually came in and realized that he perhaps stepped in a little bit too far, and Rudy was the one who actually ended up getting the device out of Mark's head, which now Mark is a little bit unleashed. So the Guardians are split. Mark actually gets a hold of Cecil, and you can tell like there's a little bit of a change getting into Mark. You can tell there's like maybe a little bit of Nolan in him maybe, but he grabs Cecil by the neck, or by, I don't remember if it was by the neck. I can remember if it was by the collar or by the neck, but he ended up grabbing Cecil and like really threatening to kill him, and threatening him, saying, if you ever come near me or my family again, I will kill you. And Mark actually seems serious about it. At the time, I was thinking that Mark wouldn't be the type to actually go through with it. Cecil, if he wanted to come in, protect him, whatever it may be, Mark wouldn't actually go through with it. Now, after the season ended, I'm like, maybe he would be a little bit open to killing Cecil, actually. So again, the Guardians broke up, they're split up, and Mark ends up going back to Eve. Eve thought about it a little bit, and they actually start a beautiful romantic relationship. I'm happy with that. Mark and Eve, I have seen a lot of Invincible content, and I know that there's a lot of people unhappy with Mark and Eve. They're a little bit more boring than your typical relationship. Eve's way better than Amber was, and I know they fixed Amber a little bit, but I like Eve. I like the way that Invincible has been writing their female characters, and I think she's a great character. I know that she hasn't exactly had too much of her own storyline, but I thought it was really cool. I like them together. They were setting it up. I think I was completely satisfied for it. I'm on Team Mark and Eve. I know a lot of people aren't happy with that, though. But now we're introduced to Oliver, and I'm not introduced to the first time, but you get my point, for the season. And I thought after the season, Oliver was an excellent addition to the cast. And it was a little bit heartbreaking because you can see, and I like the conversations between like Mark and Debbie, where it's like he wouldn't listen. Debbie's like, kind of reminds me of somebody. I enjoyed all of that. I enjoyed him trying to get his powers. All of a sudden he can fly, and he was tricking people, being a little bit deceptive. And he ends up finding his way into helping Mark, but that's hurting Mark a little bit because he wants to protect Oliver, but Oliver really, really wants to be part of this. He talked about being Kid Omni-Man, and Mark had to shut that down, unfortunately, because Oliver only knows Nolan as a good guy. Mark kind of gets that too, but he had to explain to Oliver like why the world wouldn't exactly forgive Nolan. But this is where things really picked up for Oliver, because we have the Mauler twins, and I am surprised that there's going to be no more Mauler twins. I'm a little bit shocked by that. So they were looking to do their own thing. Mark ends up putting a stop to it, but Oliver comes about, and I don't remember exactly what Mark got distracted with. I don't know if he remembered if he got sucked into a fight. Something happened to Mark. Oliver showed up and just killed them like it was nothing. And I was sitting down going like, oh, that's bad, but W, Oliver, let's go. And we kind of see, and like people are horrified by it. The problem is Oliver is a good guy, but he showed like a huge indifference to taking lives. Like he's part Viltrumite. You can see the tendency in Nolan. And when Mark went to like discipline him, he seemed like legitimately confused about it. Like, these guys are trying to hurt people. These guys are murderers. Wouldn't the planet be better without them? I did everybody a favor. And he's like, it makes sense. And that's the proper decision. Look what Mark being Mark led to. As much as I hate the idea of taking lives, Oliver's completely correct. Completely. Mark had to sit him down. Debbie had to sit him down, have a talk with him. He just didn't get it. But he pretended to get it. And he's just like, yeah, we'll think about it, right? But in the meantime, while they're having the conversation, Mark notices a little orb outside the house. I think we all thought that was Cecil. I thought it was Cecil at least, but somebody was spying on them. Mark figured it out, and it was like, oh boy. But things only pick up from here because Mark decides to go start tearing things apart again because he assumed that Cecil was spying on him. But I think he went to Rudy first, but regardless, he figured out that it originated from Earth. He assumed it was Cecil. Cecil denied it, but Mark couldn't really prove it, and he was just destroying a bunch of bots. And He didn't end up actually killing Cecil, but they see Cecil again. He still hates each other. He has a date with Eve, and Mark, unfortunately, can't have one date go well for him because now these people come in from a different timeline. Hey, Mark, we need your help in the future. They end up kidnapping him even though he didn't want to go, and Mark is kind of getting a little bit reluctant to be like, okay, no, I'm here on a date with Eve. Somebody else can figure it out. But he gets dragged into this altered dimension where Earth is being ruled by the Immortal because of Mark's actions. And you could tell that this is like starting to really get at Mark because all of the different Invincibles ever were like evil, horrible, loved killing people, and that's just not Mark. And you can see what the world actually became of it. Immortal is being tortured and ruling the world because of what Mark did, and he kind of forces Mark to kill him. So after all of that, Mark had to go back to that moment because he was brought into the future, he can be brought into the past with Eve, and he's completely just torn apart about it. Understandably so. Like, the things that Mark is going through is crazy. In the meantime, with that though, we're brought to Alan and Nolan in their escape from the prison, and there's not really anything to break down there. It was really fun to watch. I thought I would have loved to see a little bit more of them than we did, but when we did see them, it was a blast. Nolan finally figuring out that he wanted to live after being reluctant. But the only great information that we ended up taking from that is I think he said 50, if not it was 100, but there is like only a few pure-blooded Viltrumites left, and that is a pretty small number. But as the story continues, there's not really a ton to break down with the next episode, with the name of the characters escaping me, the Dragon. We have Machine Head being back. We have Multipole in prison. Like, it was just a cool fight scene everywhere. Mark and Eve wanted to get an apartment. They needed to pay for something, so they offered to protect the prison, but they didn't know that Multipole actually ended up getting out. Adam, Eve, and Mark were doing some great work. There were some really cool fight scenes. Machine Head escapes. Multipole escaped. It didn't end up going so well, but I wish I could break that down a little bit more for you. It was just a little bit of like, I imagine that that's going to be a little bit more important moving forward with the story, but it seemed to be like the least important thing going on right now. But regardless, it was very cool fight scenes. The dragon was awesome. Multipole was sick. I enjoyed all of it. But then we get into the character named Scott, and this is where things really, really picked up. I thought these next couple episodes were like some of the peak fiction that I've ever seen, okay? Everything is to satisfy, like, me personally. I know that it's not the perfect story in the world, but I loved it, okay? Another thing, speaking of, like, because I'm gassing this whole season up, like, this is one of the best seasons of a TV show I've ever seen. I know a lot of people were complaining about the animation, too. I should have talked about that at the beginning. I didn't see an issue with it. I was so captivated that I didn't care. But anyways, I want to talk about Powerplex. I was an idiot and didn't think to just pause the Prime Video to see who the voice actor was, but I was thinking that entire time, I know that voice from somewhere. I know who that is. I know that voice. It took me forever to figure it out until I paused it at some point and be like, oh my god, it's Jesse. But anyways, we're back and seeing Scott, and this is what I love about Invincible. You see the POV and you see the destruction of the world around the superheroes. It's a new take on superheroes. I love that, okay? So, Scott loses his sister and his niece, and from his perspective, it's Mark. Very interesting. So he kind of vows revenge on Mark. He has this electricity suit. He's becoming a superhero, and he just keeps wanting to get an Invincible. And man, Jesse actually did a really, really good job. Excuse me. I'm almost sure it's Aaron Paul. I always get the actors mixed up. I'm sorry if it's not. It's going to sound really stupid, but I think it's Aaron Paul. Fantastic job with the character, man. They get someone to come in and handle Powerplex because Mark just kind of dismissed it all. Eve ended up taking care of him too. He ended up escaping custody. In between that, Ray and Rex develop a relationship. That's actually the only thing that I don't want to say that I didn't like, but everybody was going crazy about like Rex and how Rex went out and things like that. I had zero attachment to Rex. I still look at him like in season 1, and I know that he turned over this new leaf and everything. I just don't care. I was never really, I don't care about him. I don't care about his girlfriend, but with Rudy and Monster Girl, I thought that was a little bit touching. You know, he fixed her, he created a belt for her, and he's still like trying to figure out his way in the world. So he's like, I thought like a belt might be best to do this. And it was like kind of wholesome, kind of cool. She's very happy. So this very, very like depressed girl, because of the curse that's on her, kind of got fixed, which is really cool. But the show picks up again, and they start off with a memorial for the victims of Chicago, for everybody that ended up getting lost. But Powerplex ended up attacking the entire thing, and it didn't work out for him. But what he decided to do was stage a kidnapping with his wife and his kid to draw out Invincible. Okay, I got these people, you need to come save them. And man, you know, Invincible takes it to that next level because Mark actually ended up coming on. He understood that like Powerplex was nothing, like he was really no problem for him. All you had to do was not hit him. You don't have to let him absorb his energy, and then he won't have a big blast. But he started getting so worked up and getting so angry. And then when I was, what's funny is I was watching the electricity, like while I was watching the show, and I was kind of thinking like, okay, maybe they're over. I actually thought this to myself. Maybe they're overdoing it a little bit, because wouldn't that like fry his wife and kid? And then the camera panned to them and they ended up being fried. And I was like, oh, okay. Maybe I wasn't overthinking that. And I don't know what to say, man. That was dark. That was horrible. I felt every little bit of that. This dude that was angry at Mark just fried his wife and kid because of his anger. And I couldn't believe it. They took it that like extra step there, and it was horrible. And again, like the actor for Jesse, he really makes you feel it when he's like screaming. It was dark, horrible. I loved it. But there's nothing he can do, and he's not going to take on Invincible. He's not like this huge superhero. He's just getting a ton of energy and a ton of electricity. So Mark takes care of him. Absolutely no problem. He's in custody. And this is where you can see the shift kind of changing in Mark as well, because Mark was trying to have like a heart-to-heart to him this entire time, saying like, I get it. I feel horrible for the people in Chicago, and I know that I had my play in it, but I was just trying to do the right thing. I feel bad for all of these people. And Scott ended up just looking at him and being like, you think that makes me feel better? I'm going to get out and I'm going to kill you. Because this dude's like so twisted that he still thinks that Mark was the reason that he ended up killing his wife and kid, but it was his anger and his horrible plan for vengeance that ended up doing it. But you can tell like this, along with what Mark just experienced with the Immortal and with all of the different Invincibles that are out there, Mark is really, really having a mental toll, and you can kind of start taking that. After that, though, we see the return of Engstrom. And it's one of those things where I'm like, come on, there's no way that he survived. And it's also really cool to see him back. I loved that because he's an incredible villain. I love that he's back, but he ended up getting a bunch of alternate versions of Mark, which are powerful, evil, and he brought them all for revenge. But what we didn't know is he made all of these deals under the table, which we're going to talk about a little bit. So all of the Marks start coming, all the Invincibles start coming. They just start unleashing hell upon Earth, just destroying everything. And this is, again, what I love what Invincible does, is it really shows the collateral damage. It shows people crying. It shows people getting ripped apart. It shows people screaming underneath debris, It's just like a little bit more realistic if like superheroes were actually like as realistic as you can make it. And that's why I like it, man. So the Guardians of the Globe, they all came up, they started attacking the Invincibles, but there's really nothing you can do because there are a bunch of Invincibles and they're basically invincible. The only thing that didn't, hit me as well as like the entire community watching this show is Rex having his ultimate sacrifice. He fought one Mark and he ended up exploding his entire body, because he's one big bomb, and sacrificed himself. To be honest with you, it didn't hit. I know that's like an unpopular take. I didn't care for Rex. I don't care about his, redemption arc. I don't know. It just didn't hit. The music was sad, Rex sacrificed himself to protect Rudy, Monster Girl, and somebody else. I don't know who else was but people ended up looking at the explosion knowing it was Rex and be like, oh my god, Rex is dead. What hit worse was when Eve was fighting and then she got her leg broken through all of that. But Engstrom ends up coming back, and it's like all of it's just a really cool fight. All of the Invincibles doing their thing. But Mark, after everything that's been going on, after watching what happened to the Immortal, after having like the actual public, see Mark as this evil guy because of what Nolan did. He's just constantly over and over trying to do the right thing, but his image is being destroyed. He is accidentally killing people because he's being knocked out by these aliens and like crashing into a building, and because he's invincible, the building's collapsing, people are dying, families are dying, and he's just going crazy at this point. Huge mental load. So while Engstrom is kind of overpowering him, Mark, and I don't know if this has anything to do with the Viltrumite power or if it's just like a show being a show where he's like in his ultimate state of emotion and ends up overpowering Engstrom. He barely escapes through a portal. And the thing was, and what's interesting is he hesitated because Oliver showed up, right? Oliver just wants to help. And Oliver was saying, well, I think that Mark was probably going to kill him either way, but Oliver, like, how old is Oliver? Like 10? He's a 10-year-old with powers, however old that he is. He ended up talking to Mark being like, hey, finish a job, Mark. This is the bad guy that's causing all the problems. You need to kill him. And then Mark, wanting to set a good example, wanting to show Oliver like, hey, you shouldn't be killing people, Engstrom was able to get away. And then Oliver was just like, what'd you do, Mark? And then again, Oliver, the little kid, is completely correct. You have this guy that's literally destroying the entire world. Are you just going to show a message and be like, hey, we don't kill people over here. And like, no, Angstrom needed to be dealt with, and now that he escaped again, he's going to come back. So what we've learned this entire time is that no matter what, you have Oliver, what's interestingly enough is he's kind of like on Team Cecil a little bit, but Oliver's probably like the most sane person there. This little kid, hey, you have a bad guy. This bad guy is killing literally everybody in the city. Why don't you just finish him off? And Mark's like, no, we don't do that here. We don't kill people. But like, there's a line. Come on, Oliver's completely correct. But that, I guess, Angstrom's going to come back and just be horrible again and probably destroy it. Like, he's going to come back in another season and it's going to be even worse than what happened. And Oliver's just going to be proven correct again. And I know that Mark kind of realized at the end, and we're going to be talking about that, but he ended up getting barely saved by those technicians. The Invincibles, by the way, they all went back to their realm, and Angstrom left them because he promised them all something else. So they're trapped. They're pissed off in whatever reality Mark was left in at that one time. And I don't know what's going to happen to them, but once they get out, they're going to be a whole other issue to deal with. But in the meantime, Angstrom has to do whatever these technicians want because he has his power. They're going to use him. So we're probably not going to see Angstrom for another couple seasons. He's going to have to deal with whatever he has to deal with. But there's no break because after all of the destruction, Conquest comes down and just to check on Mark. Hey, how's it going? How are you getting the Earth ready for the Viltrumite takeover? And then Mark is just not dealing with it, man. He's not dealing with it at all. And he just decided to charge, attack. He's taking on his first like hardcore Viltrumite fight. And I loved the idea. And this is another thing that I love about Invincible. I love the way that they're handling their villains. It's weird to say because it's a little bit refreshing that there's an evil guy just for the sake of being evil. At least with Angstrom, you have like the whole Thanos thing. And Thanos kind of kicked it off when he showed up in Infinity War, where it's like he had a reason for the things that he did. He wasn't like completely evil. Angstrom kind of fits that bill, although like ultimately they're evil, don't get me wrong. But it's a little bit refreshing to have a guy who's just, sadistic just because of the way he is. A little bit refreshing, and it's funny because we wouldn't have said that like 6-7 years ago. But there's not really a ton I can break down about the fight because it was a 45-minute long fight, and I loved every bit of it. It was incredible. The voice actors are great. The animation, I know people had problems with the animation, man, but I didn't care. Like, after everything that Mark dealt with this season, this is like the big climax. The Viltrumite is here. And you know what's crazy is I kept thinking, because Nolan and Alan escaped the prison and they fought somebody in space and it showed them winning the fight, I thought that Omni-Man was going to come save the day for Mark. I kept waiting for that. But no, it was even Oliver that kept trying to intervene. But then because Angstrom, and no, Eve broke her leg because of Invincible, but Eve was walking with a broken leg. Oliver was somehow making himself fight, and Conquest was just like so sadistic. He ended up like enjoying inflicting pain. But because both his girlfriend that he loves and his little brother are getting, punched to death by an alien, he keeps getting up and up and up. And then he ends up, what did he do? He like shoved his fist through Eve or something. Like he just ripped all of her guts out. And I actually thought that Eve died there. And that was another thing that we saw. And I was like, okay, well, I thought that that Mark and Eve were going to be like the couple for the rest of Invincible, but I guess not, because Eve ended up just getting completely destroyed. And again, I love that Invincible takes that extra mile where like he ripped off like part of her mouth, it just looks so disgusting. But because, they had that entire thing, like that entire explanation where Eve explained it after, where she can release those mental restraints that they had when they were programming her or before she was born, whatever it was. But she ended up actually being able to burn Conquest after a little while. And that gave Mark the opportunity to kill Conquest, which was really, really tough. And you can tell that just Mark does not want to kill anybody, but he's so done with it. And he's forced to do all of these horrible, horrible things. He's the only one that's capable. And something that I kind of skipped over was I also like that we actually got to see Eve use her powers in a different way, like, changing the density of the air and conquesting. Oh, okay, you know what? That's smart. But she ended up being okay. And I forgot to mention she left the hospital too, and just her whole storyline with her parents too. Like they didn't want anything to do with Mark. Kind of glazed over that, but all of that was incredibly touching. The only thing that I agree with people having their critique on Invincible is they rushed it a little bit to the point where it's like, I don't remember exactly what Mark was saying, but something along the lines of like, Eve, I can't live without you. I don't know what I would do. Every single time I was doing this, I was thinking about you. But like, how long were they together? And I saw a clip somewhere where it's like they showed a compilation and they had such little footage to the point where it was like somewhere where Eve was mad at him or something. But it's besides the point. It does the job. I'm good with it. They love each other. You know, it was everything that Mark needed to do to finish off the job with Conquest. And Mark actually ended up winning his fight against a Viltrumite. And there was something that I forgot to mention too, was the other thing that really, really, really made me like lock down on this show, like I was completely emotionally invested in it, was when I know I'm circling back just a little bit, and I'm sorry for that. I just forgot to mention it. When we thought Eve died, when Mark was carrying her, Conquest was just laughing. The dude was yelling and screaming and yelping for Cecil's help after everything. I don't like that Cecil didn't come right away. I wish that he did. I thought that would have been great because Cecil could have showed like he was forever here for them. But I don't know why. He ended up coming and saving the day regardless, but I think that would have been nice if Cecil ended up actually coming in, taking Eve away. And I was like, oh, Mark, after all of that, man, just yelling like, Cecil, I need you. And dude, again, whoever they chose for the voice actors for this are incredible. Like, it's like they're actually being tortured in real life. Amazing, okay? So, I think I glazed over everything about that fight that I wanted to glaze over. We have the funeral for Rex. Mark wakes up in the hospital. Eve and him love each other. And another thing is, and now Mark ended up speaking with Oliver. He ended up speaking with Debbie, who I didn't really talk too much about Debbie. She's a great mom. She's like the best person in the entire show. She's trying to protect Oliver. She ended up realizing the same thing that she ended up realizing with Mark. And I forgot to mention her new love interest. I like him as well because he's just a regular guy coming into this entire superhero world. All of that was okay. But he ended up talking to Oliver, Mark, and he ended up actually being, and I don't think that he's going to change his mind, but he actually talked to Oliver and said, you were right. I should have finished Angstrom. I should have done this. I should have done that. You were completely correct. Next time anybody comes between me, my family, the world, I will not hesitate to kill them. So maybe Mark is going to be a very, very dangerous hero, and I imagine that's going to create some problems with Eve because Eve is, wholesome like Mark was, but Mark is just completely so mentally broke down after everything that's happened, not only here, but in the other seasons that's happened right now. Like, Mark is done with it. He is going to kill when necessary to protect his family, and that is huge for Invincible. He has a little bit of a conversation with Cecil, and Cecil still tries to tell him, like, hey, I know you don't like me, but I'm here for whatever you need. Just like he was here for Debbie, just like he's here for Eve, everything. And I don't like that Mark is still upset with Cecil. I think that's ridiculous. But other than that, they're setting up for the next season. There is aliens taking over everybody and on their way. And then Dark Blood was, which I didn't know that this is where they were, but Dark Blood was actually in hell. I didn't know that hell was a place in Invincible, but I guess they were in hell. But there is a new character. I don't know who it is. And Dark Blood, he's like obviously really powerful because Dark Blood was like, hey, we can reclaim Hell's throne. We just need to, do whatever on Earth or whatever he said. Like, there's just going to be those aliens coming. Angstrom's still working. And now we have actual demons from hell coming to Earth. So Mark has a whole big bunch of problems coming over here. So hopefully Omni-Man and Alan end up showing up sooner than later. I really thought I was waiting for that entire 45 minutes, man. The entire time Mark, Oliver, and Eve were suffering for Nolan to come down and save the day. I thought, and I was really hoping that we would see Nolan actually have that conversation with Debbie after getting left on that cliffhanger saying, I miss my wife. But we didn't get that. But this whole season, like me talking about it didn't do it justice, man. This was one of the greatest things that I've ever seen. It actually was. This is up there with Attack on Titan and Better Call Saul for me. One of the greatest shows that I've ever seen in my life, and I can't wait for season 4. Can't wait for it. Even the things where I was like with Rex's sacrifice, I was like, I didn't feel it. A show has never gone by quicker for me. And this show actually had me sitting down and saying, thinking about it. And this never happens for me. I was actually thinking about, okay, what's going to happen next in Invincible when I wasn't watching it? You know what show's fantastic one? I get the hype behind it, guys. Let me know what you think about season 3 down below. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to be checking the comments because I am so into the show. I know somebody's going to spoil the comics. I'm not going to be checking. So usually I would say, let me know what you think down below. So write something and I'll circle back to it in season 4. If you want to continue watching my season 1 or season 2 review, if you haven't seen it, you can check them out on screen right here. I would love to have you over there. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, everybody.